In this video, we're going to talk about bench trials versus jury trials. And the number one question is, should you choose a trial by a judge or a jury? How should your case be decided? That choice can make or break the outcome in your case. Let's break down bench trials versus jury trials. So first, what they are, a jury trial. A jury trial is a group of citizens deciding guilt or innocence based on the evidence. In other words, it's people out of your community come to the courthouse and hear your case and say whether the state has met their burden. A bench trial is a judge alone decides both the facts and the law on your case. In other words, a judge hears your case, just one person, and decides whether the state has met their burden or not. Now, there are pros and cons to each one of these. Pros of a jury trial was, first, you get a constitutional right to be judged by your peers. You have the right to have people come out of your community and say, in this community, this is right and this is wrong. A jury trial can be good if your case involves themes of sympathy or has high emotions, or your case is reflective of the community values in your area. Juries have a larger perspective or a more broad spectrum of experiences that they bring to the table when they decide someone's case. Now, there are cons of a jury trial. Jurors can be swayed by emotions. They might be biased, or they may be confused. Also, jury trials take longer and are more expensive. It's harder to predict a lot of times what 12 people will think compared to a single judge. Just like there are pros and cons to a jury trial, there are pros and cons to a bench trial. Pros to a bench trial is they're generally faster, they're generally way less formal, and they're often a lot less expensive for the defendant in the case. You have to remember who's hearing your case. Like, a judge is obviously a lawyer in your community, is going to have been trained in the law. They're going to have more of a grasp on the technicalities of the law and might be able to understand complex cases that a juror might not be able to. Another benefit to having a bench trial is there's no risk of jury bias because there simply isn't a jury in the courtroom deciding your case. A con of a bench trial is you're relying on one single person's opinion. You're not getting the benefit of having 12 people's experiences when they're deciding your case. You also have to remember that judges may lean one specific way before you even walk into the courtroom. There might be less opportunity to appeal to sympathy or tell a human story that a jury might understand that a judge simply might not. Now, there's a little bit of strategy when you're deciding whether you're going to pick a jury trial or whether you're going to pick a bench trial. And how lawyers decide is they generally look at a couple of different things. If I have a case that involves human emotion, it has credibility contests, there's some reasonable doubt arguments. If it's a case in which my client might have technically violated the law, but most people would perceive that they haven't done anything wrong, well, that's a case that I want to have in front of a jury. I want to rely on a broad swath of the community to come in and say whether my client has violated the law or not. Kind of the opposite of that is if I have a case that involves a legal technicality, maybe an evidence rule that the prosecutor isn't aware of, or maybe the facts just simply can't be put in front of a jury. There's maybe gang cases or really gruesome photos or something that I know is just going to get in front of the jury and they're not going to be able to separate the bad act out from my client's actions. That's a case in which I'll probably ask for a bench trial. When you're deciding a bench trial or a jury trial, it's not a one-size-fits-all. The decision depends on the facts, the law, and sometimes even the judge. That's why it's critical to talk strategy with your defense lawyer. Meet with your lawyer often whenever you're preparing for this trial, and rely on your lawyer's expertise, being in that courtroom and their experience, how a judge or a jury might rule on your particular case.